After 5 years of battling terminal cancer, Hiraku's last spark of life flickered out, and his soul drifted into the heavenly realm. Having spent 39 years dealing with betrayal and suffering, the god of the world apologized for accidentally giving him such a rough deal. To make up for it, the god promised Hiraku a second life with a healthy body and the power to grant any wish. Hiraku's one desire? To be reborn as a farmer in a quiet, secluded area. To help him out, the god handed Hiraku the most overpowered tool in the universe, the almighty farming tool. With a single tap, Hiraku's life reignited, and he woke up in the middle of a forest. Moving his body for the first time in years, he realized this was everything he had ever dreamed of. With the almighty farming tool in hand, he started working the ground. While cultivating the field, Hiraku noticed he never got tired using the tool. He needed a good spot for his farm, so he wandered through the entire forest until he found a massive tree to call home. No rivers or ponds in sight, so to quench his thirst, Hiraku decided to dig a well. His almighty farming tool transformed into a shovel, letting him dig deep into the earth until water finally started bubbling up. With a water source secured, he began clearing the land, but a big tree blocked his way. Remembering his past life's knowledge, he tried cutting it strategically, but one swing of his almighty axe brought the tree down instantly. He dashed out of the way before it could crush him. Using his first oak log, he made 4 oak planks with his mallet. After converting all the logs into planks using his crafting table, the sun began to set. Panicking to get some firewood, he spent the night carving a hole into the giant tree. At first, he thought of building a dirt shack but remembered that gravity still worked, so he didn't want to bury himself alive. The next morning, he gathered firewood and started his first fire to avoid repeating his mistake. After more than a day of tree clearing, Hiraku hadn't felt tired or hungry, thanks to his almighty tool. Just as he was about to keep clearing the forest, a monster rabbit charged at him. With his mighty stick, he took it out instantly. While eating the skewers, he felt a bit guilty for killing the rabbit and wished he had a proper place to cook. So, Hiraku created an innovative toilet and a shelter for privacy. With everything settled, he began cultivating the land and spent the rest of the day deciding which veggies to plant first. By the time he was done, it was late, so he planned to search for seeds the next day. But in the morning, plants were already sprouting. It made no sense how they grew from nothing, and Hiraku figured it was a side effect of his farming tool. Regardless, he started building a fence to protect them from zombies at night and dug a mound to keep creepers out. The process took a few days, but after finishing the perimeter, Hiraku noticed the plants were growing incredibly fast. Using spare wood, he built a small log house and used his carpentry skills to make a nice roof, upping his civilization level. After a few more days of expanding his farm, Hiraku found a couple of injured wolves. He brought them inside with leftover meat from a giant boar he had defeated. He fed them and noticed one of the wolves was pregnant. As a kid, Hiraku always wanted a dog, so he wished for them to keep him company. The female wolf went into labor, so he brought them into the log house and made a fire to keep them warm. After a long, sleepless night, Hiraku saw 4 little puppies feeding. To celebrate their healthy birth, he gave them the best meat he had gathered. As time passed, the dogs stuck around his hut, so Hiraku built a new house next to them. By the time the puppies started running around, his plants were ready for harvest. He noticed tomatoes were the first to produce fruit and offered some to his dogs, naming the male Kiro and the female Yuki. After a few weeks, Hiraku learned all the secrets behind his almighty farming tool. While thinking about potatoes, the almighty tool planted potato seeds through magic. He used this trick to create all the foods he'd ever wanted. On top of that, anything he grew with his almighty tool would grow much faster than it normally would. Grateful for the fact that the gods gave him such an overpowered item, Hiraku created 2 statues to commemorate them. That afternoon, he realized that his diet was becoming repetitive, so he decided to begin planting some trees. Although they might take years to start producing fruit, the wait would be worth it. As weeks passed, the wolves started growing horns, and they discovered a waterfall 30 minutes away. Creating a canal would make obtaining fresh water much easier, but the distance he'd have to dig was too long. So, for the time being, he focused on his base. The farm was growing steadily, and he had begun adding a variety of plants like wheat and sugarcane to sustain himself. However, as months of progress passed, Hiraku began losing track of days, and winter was fast approaching. There was no chance he could continue farming in this state, and the pelt from the giant rabbits smelled awful as it began rotting. To prepare for winter, he gathered food and firewood. One day, Cairo brought him to meet a giant spider. With silk from its tail, the spider produced a handkerchief with detailed embroidery. It became the new citizen in his small farm, providing textiles in exchange for some potatoes. Whether he needed a winter coat, a bed stuffed with leaves, or curtains to block out the cold wind, the spider, Zabudan, produced everything he ever needed. His small hut was slowly becoming more civilized. Winter finally arrived, and with the fireplace he had built, Hiraku survived the harsh cold nights. Still, he felt awfully lonely, worrying that he would forget how to talk to someone. When the long winter passed and spring finally came, the wolf children had grown and decided to leave the nest. But a few days later, they returned with partners. One of them even beat up a lackey wolf and won the girl over like a giga-chat. However, they weren't the only ones with surprises. The spider came back with her own children. All of their families were getting bigger, so Hiraku began farming to feed them. But as he farmed, the spider sounded the alarm. Hiraku and the hero ran toward the source and found a silver-haired girl crying in the middle of the forest. All of the animals were apprehensive, and she tried asking him for help. So, Hiraku approached her, but as he tried to cover her, he fell for her trap. The girl jumped towards him to take a bite of his neck, transforming into a plot-filled vampire. The wolves attacked her right away and began destroying her, causing her to transform back into her little form. He wondered if she was his enemy, but the girl said the reason she had to suck his blood was to recover her energy before withering away. Feeling bad for how hard his dogs had beaten her up, he offered her a bite of his neck, and she began sucking his... She began sucking his blood. She transformed back into a bigger version of herself, but Hiraku remembered her being taller and having more plot. So, he told her to hurry the and suck more of his blood so he could see her giant plot again. After sucking all of his bodily fluid, Hiraku showed her around his farm. It was her first time seeing these abnormal fruits, and when she took a bite of them, she thought they were delicious. He was glad someone was enjoying his food because for the first time, he'd found a person he could enjoy spending time with in this lonely world. Back at his house, he realized that today had been full of surprises and wondered if something like this would ever happen again. "Your name is Luluka," and she asked him if she could come to visit him in the future. But he had a different request and asked her if she would stay with him here forever. He doesn't want it to be just a one-night stand because her __ hit different. Lou thinks that he's trying to propose to her. He doesn't want to let this chance go away and doesn't care if she's a vampire. He doesn't know how many more years he can handle being alone. She tells him that it's just so sudden because she wasn't expecting a marriage proposal. But Hiraku realizes that she misunderstood what he actually meant. After understanding that he was actually proposing, he decided to double down, begging her to marry him. Lou smiles at him, saying that she wants to stay with him forever. He drags her to bed for another one-night stand. So, the following day arrives, and Hiraku feels like a seasoned farmer with his agricultural tools. He wields a long stick-like implement on his hoe, carefully tending to the young plants, nurturing them with hope. Sitting side by side, they watch the trees grow. Suddenly, the spider alarm rings out. Deja vu strikes again. Hiraku rushes over, pondering why he experiences this eerie familiarity. He frees the angel girl, realizing that the plot is about to take an intriguing turn. Lou attempts to sneak away, but the angel girl finally catches her. The dogs bark, and Lou, who had been hiding in the forest, is upset about getting injured due to the barking. Hiraku wonders why Lou's injury would trigger the dog's reaction. The angel girl, curious about Hiraku, blushingly introduces herself as Tia. She explains that she's hunting Lou because there's a bounty on her head. Tia had been researching various concoctions and accidentally caused an explosion in the kingdom, leading her to be in the forest that day. Tia leans over the table and asks Lou if she'd like to live here. She promises to show her all the crops, including Hiraku's eggplants next to the round peaches. Lou takes her on a tour of the farm, and Hiraku even teaches her how to cut cabbage. After cutting it, he prepared it as a meal and sprinkled some salt on it before handing it to her. She thought it was delicious. After a long day of farming, they cleaned themselves up using their magical abilities. Inside his house, she tried strawberries for the first time, and Lou told her that they'd be showing her how to make a strawberry cream pie next. She grabbed onto Lou's arms, begging to live there with them because she couldn't handle everything alone. This was the beginning of their life together. Tia thought she enjoyed the strawberry cream pie so much that she asked him for more strawberries, but Hiraku thought expanding even more right now would result in spoiled food. While they continued walking, Hiraku noticed Kiro's new poppies and decided to build a stable for them in the open field next to their farm. After he was done, he noticed all of Zabutan's children casting their silk to fly away at the same time. Tia told him that she was also going to be leaving for a while and started flying away on her wings. A few days later, Tia came back and brought even more girls to add to the harem. They were high elves with giant plots and all of them introduced themselves. They were also all related, so Wincest was going to prevail in this plot. Hiraku wondered why there weren't any guy elves, but Tia revealed the sad reality they had endured during the last Great War. Their entire male population was destroyed and they had been roaming the woods until now. Their only wish was to repopulate, and they begged Hiraku to help them. With the village population increasing, Hiraku began building a house for all of them to live together. Their skills in construction and woodworking allowed them to build the house within just 10 days, and they thought it was much nicer than Hiraku's dirt shack. However, at the very least, he wished that in this spacious house they could feel safe and at peace. As the days passed, the elf leader wanted to thank him for letting them stay there by mining and blacksmithing for him. So, they began building a furnace in the earth. After processing the iron, Hiraku saw the metal pots they had created, and they told him they could do all kinds of things after living in the wild for 200 years. Still, the only thing they wished to be able to do was to settle down and reproduce. Hiraku thought it would be best to avoid developing plot lines with all the elves and act like a typical anime protagonist.
What? What the fuck?
One day, while farming, the elf girls noticed he had a giant wheat field. One of them asked if she could make some bread, telling him she had the rarest yeast in the land. Hiraku was excited, so the girls began baking bread and turned it into breadsticks for him to try. At the same time, they all wondered if Hiraku's plot was this long and tasty. Now that he was finally able to make some bread, he wanted to expand the wheat fields but realized that their expansion was starting to get out of control. He asked Lu who owned this land, and she told him that while nobody officially owned it, it was probably under the Demon Lord's control. However, since he created all this land without support, this land belonged to Hiraku. At night, the girls gathered and wondered how Hiraku had managed to tame the inferno wolves and the demon spider. Even these crops shouldn't be able to grow in this soil, and they began wondering why he had no knowledge about their world. At the same time, Hiraku realized he hadn't been building the waterway for a long time, so he decided to make it tomorrow's mission.